All right, today we're diving into a theory that completely flips our understanding of reality on its head. It's called the Sentient-Field hypothesis, and it suggests that consciousness isn't just some random byproduct of the universe, it is the universe. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's just start with a question that turns physics upside down. We usually assume that things like matter, energy, space, and time, that's the fundamental bedrock of everything. But what if it's not? What if all of that is actually a projection? Like images on a screen, and it's all being generated by something far more basic. So this right here is the central idea. Proponents call it the great reversal. See, standard physics tells us that when you get complex arrangements of matter, like, our brains, consciousness just kind of pops out of it. But the sentience-field hypothesis completely flips the script. It argues that a fundamental field of sentience is the primary fabric of everything. And it's this field that organizes itself to create what we see as matter and the laws of physics. All right, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with this great reversal, then look at why anyone would even propose this, the cracks in our current reality. We'll dig into the universe's supposed master rule, search for any evidence, check out the cosmic implications, and we'll end on a really big question about our own existence. Okay, so first up, the great reversal. Basically, the main idea here is that experience itself comes first. The theory is that before there were particles, before there was space-time, there was a raw capacity to feel, and everything else we see is just a consequence of that capacity arranging itself. So you might be asking, why even come up with an idea this radical, right? Well, it's because our standard model of physics, for all its incredible success, has some really deep, nagging puzzles that it just can't seem to crack. And those puzzles really boil down to these two big ones. First, the hard problem of consciousness. Look, physics is great at explaining how a brain works, the wiring, the chemicals, but it has zero explanation for why it feels like something to be you. Why is there a first-person movie playing in your head? And second, the fine-tuning problem. The basic numbers that govern our universe, they are tuned for life with ridiculous precision. If you change them even a tiny, tiny bit, poof, no stars, no planets, no life. The sentience-field hypothesis says, hey, what if these aren't two separate problems? What if they're two sides of the same coin? If the universe is inherently sentient and trying to create complexity, then our own consciousness and a life-friendly universe aren't shocking coincidences anymore. They're exactly what you'd expect. Okay, so how is this sentient field supposed to actually generate reality? Well, the theory proposes there's a single master rule, a kind of engine for reality that's always balancing two opposing forces. And this isn't about energy or gravity as we know it. It's all about optimizing for meaning and structure. The first force in this cosmic tug-of-war is called coherence. Just think of it as the universe's instinct for stability, for pattern, for self-preservation. It's the force that holds things together. You can almost think of it as the ego of the universe, this deep-seated drive to just exist and be stable. And on the other side, you've got fertility. This is its polar opposite. It's the push for new things, for more complexity, for exploring every weird and wonderful possibility. This is the universe's creative drive, always churning out new patterns and new structures. So according to the theory, our entire reality is just the result of this constant balancing act between these two drives. If you have too much coherence, the universe just freezes up into a boring, static crystal. Too much fertility, and it all dissolves into total chaos. Our universe, with us in it, is supposedly living right on that razor's edge between the two, in the absolute sweet spot where amazing complexity can grow from a stable foundation. I know. At this point, this probably sounds a whole lot more like philosophy than physics. But the people behind this hypothesis argue that it's a completely testable, falsifiable scientific idea. They say there are actual signals in the data that point to this dynamic being real. But really, can we measure any of this? Is there any actual data to back up such a wild idea, or is it just a really cool story? Let's take a look at what they point to. Okay, so this is what proponents point to as the first big piece of evidence. Researchers ran a simulation of 60,000 possible universes, and in each one, they randomly tweaked the basic laws of physics. Then, they measured each one's potential for both coherence, stability, and fertility, the ability to create complexity. Now look at that graph. Our universe, that little gold star, isn't just anywhere. It's sitting right at a peak of what the theory calls sentient potential. And the odds of that happening just by chance? We're talking about 1 in almost 110,000. That's not random. And what's even more interesting is that the simulation shows this really clear pattern. As you can see, fertility, the potential for life and all that complex stuff, is basically zero until you reach a really high level of coherence or stability. So in other words, the universe has to build a super stable, orderly foundation first, before all the cool, creative, complex stuff can happen. This coherence comes first idea is a central prediction of the theory. And it's not just that one simulation. Proponents point to a bunch of recent, independent studies that are frankly pretty hard to explain with our current models. So get this. One study found quantum effects inside tiny structures in our brains, called microtubules, that seem to be directly related to how anesthesia affects consciousness. Another found hints of signaling between our neurons that looks like it's happening faster than the speed of light. A third showed that using quantum entanglement, that spooky action at a distance, actually boosted a learning algorithm's performance by over 30%. Every single one of these findings hints that this weird, non-local quantum stuff plays a way bigger role in biology than we ever imagined, which is exactly what this hypothesis would predict. All right, so if we even entertain this evidence for a second, what does it all mean? What are the implications? Well, this is where the theory gets really big, suggesting a structure to reality that is genuinely mind-bending.
It all starts with this one number, 10 to the power of 24. So, what on earth is so special about this mind-bogglingly huge number?
Well, the theory suggests that the universe has, get this, a finite experiential budget. So to keep from collapsing under its own complexity, it has to repeat its basic patterns at different scales. And it supposedly does this at a very specific ratio, 10 to the 24th power. This creates a kind of fractal reality, where the structure of something tiny, like a proton, echoes the structure of something enormous, like a star. It's not a coincidence, it's a mathematical rule to keep the whole show running. And that brings us to a quote that really just perfectly captures this whole paradigm shift. The idea is that reality isn't a cold, dead machine running on energy. Instead, it's a meaning engine that runs on coherence, a self-organizing system where the main goal is to create stable, meaningful experience. And all of this brings us to our final and maybe biggest question of all. One that takes this huge cosmic theory and brings it right back home to your personal experience of being alive right now.
So look, if there's anything to this Sentient-Field hypothesis, if it's even partly correct, then the physical world you see around you, the chair you're in, the screen you're looking at, that's not the real deal. It's a stable projection, a kind of user interface, being generated by a deeper field of consciousness. And that leaves us with one final, pretty profound question to just sit with. If your reality is a projection, what exactly is projecting it?